something? We can't promote!
Imagine drilling down through nearly 2 miles of solid, bone-chilling ice in the heart of Greenland. It's quiet, it's desolate, and it's a time capsule. For decades, scientists with the North Greenland Ice Core project have been pulling up these frozen cylinders, looking for secrets about our climate. But they stumbled onto something much darker. They didn't just find bubbles of ancient air, they found the forensic evidence of a 2,000-year-old crime scene. A global industrial catastrophe that was caught in the act, frozen in time. While the Romans were busy building the Colosseum and codifying modern law, they were also churning out something else: poison. Thousands of tons of aerosolized lead drifting 2,800 miles across the Atlantic. This wasn't just a local soot problem. This was the world's first recorded instance of global industrial pollution. And the monster wasn't just in the air, it was in the blood. We're talking about a neurotoxin so potent, it likely shaved 3 points off the IQ of every single child in the empire. Was the Pax Romana a golden age, or was it a slow-motion biological suicide? To understand Rome, you have to understand the silver denarius. It was the heartbeat of the empire. It paid the legions, built the roads, and kept the peace. But there's a catch. You can't get that much silver without mining a whole lot of lead. For every ounce of silver that went into a soldier's pocket, thousands of ounces of toxic lead were spewed into the atmosphere. It was a trade-off the Romans didn't even know they were making. It was everywhere. In the pipes that brought fresh water to their villas, in the pots they used to cook their stews, and even in the sapa, the lead-infused syrup they used to sweeten their wine. It was a lifestyle choice that was literally eating away at their brains. The central question we're asking today is chilling. Did Rome fall because of barbarians at the gate, or because they'd poisoned their own leaders and citizens into a collective cognitive decline? Step back to the 1st century AD. The Roman world is hungry. It's a superpower with a massive overhead, a 1 million-man army, and a bureaucracy that spans 3 continents. To keep the lights on, they needed silver, and lots of it. This wasn't some small-time operation. This was state-sponsored industrialization on a scale the world wouldn't see again for another 1,700 years. They turned the mountains of Spain into a giant churning machine for metal. How do we know the scale of this? The ice doesn't lie. During the height of the Pax Romana, the air was thick with it. Research shows that more than 500,000 tons of lead were pumped into the atmosphere during this era. Think about that. In the 1st century, near the smelting hubs, air lead levels hit 150 nanograms per cubic meter. In a modern city, that would trigger a public health emergency. But for the Romans, that was just the smell of money. It was progress. They thought the thick white smoke from the furnaces was a sign of a booming economy. They called it the glory of the empire. But the stakes couldn't have been higher. Lead is a ghost. It has no smell, no taste, and 0 biological use for a human. Once it gets into your system, it stays. It's a persistent neurotoxin that doesn't just make you sick, it makes you less you. It attacks the very things that made Rome great: its administrative brilliance, its strategic mind, and its social stability.
To understand the sheer scale of the poison, we first have to look at the machines that created it. The Romans didn't just mine mountains, they wrecked them. They called it the Ruina Montium, literally the wrecking of the mountains. Was this efficient? You bet it was, but it was also a masterpiece of geological violence. Their engineers would spend months carving miles of tunnels, or arugia, deep into the mountain's belly. They were looking for a structural sweet spot. By gutting the mountain from the inside out, they were using Hooke's law before anyone knew what to call it, reducing the mountain's internal support until it was standing on a prayer. Then comes the water hammer. Imagine 18,000 tons of water, that's about 7 Olympic-sized swimming pools, released in a matter of seconds. It hits those dead-end tunnels at terminal velocity. Since water doesn't compress, that kinetic energy has nowhere to go but through the rock. The pressure wave is so massive that it causes the entire mountain face to undergo a controlled collapse. It's a man-made landslide that turns solid rock into a manageable mound of mud and gold-bearing ore. It's brilliant engineering, but it's also a total environmental reset. The rivers downstream didn't just turn muddy, they became choked with toxic silt that would stay there for centuries. But the real monster was hidden in the ore. The Romans were after silver for their coins, and that meant mining galena. This stuff is a silver-lead sandwich, and separating them is a nightmare. For every single ounce of silver they minted into a denarius, they had to process thousands of ounces of lead. This is where the cupellation process comes in. They'd melt the alloy at a blistering 1,000 degrees Celsius and blast it with air. The lead would oxidize into litharge, a molten yellow scum, while the silver stayed pure. The problem? That scum didn't just stay in the furnace. A massive chunk of it escaped into the sky as fine, white dust. These particles were 100 times smaller than a human hair. They were light enough to stay airborne for weeks and travel thousands of miles. This was the world's first industrial smog. It didn't matter if you were a senator or a slave. If you were breathing the air of the Pax Romana, you were breathing in a neurotoxin that was slowly, silently rewiring your brain. But the air was just the beginning. The Romans had a fatal attraction to lead because it made life, well, sweeter. They'd boil down unfermented grape juice into a syrup called sapa. Because of the chemical reaction with the lead pots, it tasted like liquid candy. They used it to preserve their wine and sweeten their food. Was it delicious? Apparently. Was it deadly? Absolutely. It created a compound called lead acetate, literally sugar of lead. And for the ladies of the elite, they slathered their faces in ceruse, a lead-based white makeup. It gave them a ghostly, aristocratic, pale look, but it also caused their hair to fall out, their skin to scar, and their minds to wander. We can still see the evidence today in their bones. When lead builds up in the body, it eventually settles in the gums, creating what doctors call a Burton's line. It's a bluish tattoo of toxicity. But the damage beneath the surface was far worse. In children, lead mimics calcium, tricking the brain into absorbing it. Once it's in, it starts dismantling the neural pathways responsible for impulse control and complex reasoning. Recent studies show that the background air pollution alone was enough to raise the average Roman child's blood lead level to 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. That's the threshold where modern doctors pull the fire alarm. Now, does a 3-point drop in IQ really matter? On an individual level, maybe not. You might just feel a bit more irritable or struggle with a math problem. But across a population of 80 million, it's a catastrophe. It means you have half as many geniuses to solve complex administrative problems. It means your bureaucracy becomes slower, your military leaders become more impulsive, and your citizenry becomes more prone to violence. It's not that lead killed Rome in a day, it's that lead made Rome too cloudy to save itself when the real crises hit. The ice core tells us exactly when the party ended. Around 165, lead levels plummeted. Why? Because the Antonine Plague, likely smallpox, swept through the empire, killing 10% of the population. The mines went silent because the workers were dead. But here's the kicker. Lead is known to suppress the human immune system. A population that had been breathing in neurotoxins for 2 centuries was a sitting duck for a pandemic. The lead curse didn't just make them less bright, it made them fragile. When the plague hit, the Pax Romana didn't just stumble, it broke.